Education. I'm a program director. I'm here with my colleague, Gina Barrett, also a program director, and we're thrilled that you gave us a few minutes of your time today to talk about a new model for career mentoring called small group career mentoring. This session is being recorded so that we can share it with anyone who has not wasn't able to actually attend during the live session today. So with that, thank you all for those of you who have had time to respond in the chat with where you're from and who you are. Again, we're thrilled that you're here. So just quickly, we know that folks have a wide variety of knowledge about the PA Future Ready Index. I saw some 3s, I saw some 1s, I saw some 2s on the chat. So for those of you who have less familiarity, the PA Future Ready Index is how the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth, determines and tracks how prepared students are for life after high school on a variety of measures, which I will not get into, but one of the measures is around an industry-based learning indicator. And there are 3 ways to meet that indicator. One is by taking a NOCTI or NIMS test. Those are mostly completed by students who attend career and technical centers. You can complete an industry recognized credential, and the state has a list of what are approved credentials that meet this requirement. But the most common way for students to complete this requirement is by completing a work-based learning experience. And there are 6 options which have different time requirements, different engagement requirements, most of which were incredibly difficult to do this year during the pandemic. So because students couldn't go to an employer and say, this is, I can shadow you on a shop floor, or I can engage with you in a meeting, as I'm sure you're all well aware. So we worked with the state, and we considered some different opportunities and looked at the one option, which is career mentoring. Now, normally career mentoring is a one-to-one relationship. The requirement is for 6 hours of time for a student to engage with a professional, and really focused on building that relationship in a career cluster that the student is interested in pursuing after high school. So if I'm interested in healthcare, I'm building a relationship with a nurse, for example, just to keep it really broad. So we used those requirements from the state and said, well, how can we scale this in a way that can be done in a virtual, a hybrid, or an in-person environment? Because it's not really feasible from a business perspective or from a school perspective to do that one-to-one relationship for every student. So we looked at this model as a way to bring together small groups of employers and small groups of students together to kind of learn from one another and meet this requirement. The state had always said that part of career mentoring could be done virtually, but in this model, you have the option of doing the entire program virtually. Quickly, before we get into the specifics, with this model, you still meet employer needs of expanding awareness of the industry and employer. You're maximizing the time for those professionals with a targeted group of students who are actually interested in that industry. And it helps students not only understand what the business does, but various pathways for getting to those positions and the opportunities that exist for career paths. Sometimes students forget that you can start in one position, but you don't stay in that position for your entire career. The key differences in this model, and this is what really makes it different, again, those small groups of students. So it's not one student talking to one professional, but it's a group of 5 to 20 students learning from a small group of professionals. So it's not one professional has to give up 6 hours of live time to talk with these students and bear the burden of all the knowledge and all the experience to meet their individual needs, but that more than one professional can share their story and their experiences and their advice with these students to help them get a better sense of what this industry, what a career in this field would look like. And the other key difference is that it can be done in a virtual or a hybrid environment. A lot of times we hear about barriers for career mentoring and a lot of these work-based learning experiences related to geography. That's too far away. The transportation cost is too much. While in a virtual environment, that's not an issue. Similarly, time is often an issue, right? While it takes me an hour to get there, I have an hour session and an hour to get home. That's 3 hours of time, not 1 hour of time. If the professional is also traveling, that amount of time involved grows pretty quickly. But if you're in a virtual environment or a hybrid environment, that cuts down on that barrier as well. And finally, there is a safety issue that can be overcome with this model as well. We hear from particularly an example is in construction, right? There's a lot of liability that goes along with having a young person on the site. Well, in this case, you can connect with the superintendent or an engineer on that construction site, see what they're actually doing, but there's not the liability that that student is going to be injured because they crossed a barrier and got hit by a piece of equipment. And because of these differences, I do want to let you know that our model was recognized by the US Department of Education as a promising model for overcoming these barriers that other folks should consider. So we are thrilled to be sharing it and hope that it can help your students and you as you try and find more ways to meet the work-based learning experience requirement, yes, but most importantly, to help your students really have meaningful experiences that help them make informed decisions about what they're going to do after high school. Now, you can do this model in a variety of ways. We have done it so far with single companies, right? One large company can provide multiple professionals to engage with a variety of students. Those students may come from one district or from multiple districts. However, you can also have multiple companies come together to serve, again, one district's worth of students or multiple districts of students, really depending on the size of the company and their capacity to engage. A lot of times we hear that small and medium-sized businesses don't have capacity to give up 5 employees to engage in something like this. Well, can you give 2 employees for 2 hours and join with 2 additional companies in the same industry to provide a similar experience, but from multiple perspectives? So it really lends itself to that kind of flexibility and adaptability for the environment and the people who are ready to engage and want to make have a meaningful connection across students and employers. Again, the timing is flexible based on your availability. So if the business says we can do one hour a week for 6 weeks, great. If 2 hours a week over 3 weeks works better, that's fine. If every other week over 12 weeks, that also works. You really use the time that you have available and you use the time that works well for the professionals and the students and schools involved. So far, we have done the model primarily in virtual environments, but we had some interest from the people who participated saying, oh, it would be really great to have one day where we went to the business. Well, it's easily adaptable to a hybrid model when we're in a non-COVID situation. You could easily have one of the sessions or even a session that's longer, right? A 2-hour session at the end where students go to the business and take a tour and talk, see some things in action, and then have a time for questions and answers after that. So it's really flexible and able to meet the needs and the opportunities that are available, as long as your contact time between the students and the professionals ends up in 6 hours, and that the focus is on the relationships and the pathways that professionals have taken, rather than this is more for the employers that you work with, but it's not a dog and pony show for the employer. It's about how do students enter this field and succeed in this field as they move forward with their careers. As you might suspect, there are a variety of roles for people engaged in implementing the model. Obviously, you have educators who are responsible for bringing students to the table and reporting the completion of the work-based learning experience to the state. That is something that the employers take on, the schools take on. You need to make sure you coordinate with your PIMS person on that. Obviously, students are involved. They're really responsible for engaging with professionals and reflecting on what they learned so that they can say, and what I learned from this makes me think differently about my own career. Or what I learned from this, I really want to make sure that I pay attention to this when I apply to jobs moving forward. Employers are responsible for bringing professionals to the table around the particular area or areas of interest. And sometimes an organization like the consortium is involved as an intermediary. We offer coordination and support and really trying to assist and make sure that it's a smooth and engaging program for everyone involved. So back to the educators, let's talk a little bit more about that since that's you. One of your primary roles is to recruit students who have an interest in one or more of the career clusters that are being brought to the table by the employer that you're connected with. It's really important that those students can attend all the sessions. Obviously, things come up and you can find ways to work around a missed session, but you want to plan for them attending all the sessions so that when someone is sick, that they're not missing a session on purpose, and then they're also missing one that they didn't intend to. You'll want to arrange for students to register for the session. There's usually media release forms involved. So all of that kind of paperwork on the student side is the educator's responsibility. Similarly, you want to make sure that the students are prepared for the sessions. They are familiar with the expectations of the employer. So if you're working with a bank, you want to make sure that you show up with your camera on and you're ready to engage and listen. And also, like, make sure your clothes are clean and preferably don't have holes in them. Things of that sort. As an educator, if you're the point person for your group, you want to make sure that you also can attend all of the session. Most of the time, your employer partners will not be folks who have clearances, excuse me. So you want to make sure that you are there making sure that your students are safe. Not that any employer would ever do anything, but you just never want that to become a barrier to participation. Again, you want to ensure that your students are attending the meeting, that if your school or district requires a certain kind of documentation for participation, that they're completing that paperwork. And then again, that you're reporting their completion of the requirement to your PIMS coordinator so that that can be documented appropriately. Students need to complete all the paperwork, show up on time, appropriately dressed, camera on, and interested in the topic at hand. You want them to attend all of the sessions and really reflect on what they've heard and learned and how that impacts how they're thinking about their futures, right? That's like the whole point of career mentoring, is that they are thoughtful about their own career paths, their own career journeys. The employers that you engage with will need to identify professionals to share about their careers and their career pathways. Whoever is the point person at the company will need to prepare the professionals for the sessions. They'll need to coordinate the timing and make sure they're available at whatever time is arranged with the students in the school. And ensure that one or more individuals will attend multiple sessions. We found that this is a really key piece because of that relationship building requirement from the state. You want the students to develop a familiarity with someone at the business. So if they have follow-up questions, either after a particular session or after the program is over, they have a person they can go to directly in that industry who can connect them to another professional or can answer their questions directly. Again, I mentioned that intermediary is optional for a role. That is the role that the consortium played in this process so far. We worked to recruit and support both the employer and the educator partners who were engaged in the program. We facilitated the sessions with the employer to make sure that the technology was in place, that the sessions were designed in a way that met PDE requirements, that the content was meeting and the students' needs and being engaging, as opposed to kind of sit and get and having them really tune out. We attended all the sessions. We at the consortium also have clearances, so we provided another layer of support in that way. And we provided a description of the program for the educator liaisons to use while recruiting students to the program that could be adapted or adopted as they saw fit. And then we were there as a resource for any challenges that came up, including having one of the educators, their union went on strike and they couldn't be there. And so we were there to support the students so that they didn't miss out on the opportunity because of the situation with the union and the administration. And then we did send regular reminders about the sessions. If you are not working with an intermediary, these roles need to be assigned probably to the educator or the school. And that's just because you will have the most knowledge about these things, things that employers just will not be familiar with. But it doesn't mean that you can't move forward without an intermediary. You just want to make sure these things are attended to. A few other tasks. Someone will need to create the registration form and sign up forms, the release forms. Again, this should be done by either the educator or the intermediary representative. And someone needs to set up the technology, right? Most of the time this will happen via video conferencing of some kind. Someone will need to set that up and distribute the login information. Some businesses really have a hard policy on what platforms can be used. We find that's most common in the finance industry for security purposes. That isn't a problem as long as you have your tech person on board and ready to help you to make sure that everything is installed on your students' devices. We did run the program as a one-to-one to make sure that each student could engage individually, ask questions, and there wasn't an issue of some students closer to the camera or the microphone or all of those kinds of technology pieces that we found to be standard practice during the pandemic.
I will just,
yes, Gina.
Debbie, if it's okay, I just wanted to interject one thing. I know this isn't always something that you could do, but if you could possibly even have maybe a tech person on standby for the first session, it may be helpful. And obviously that might not be an option for you, but even if they could be there to help out, because I know Debbie and I have both run these, and we had a instance where everything was fine on the educator's laptop, but all the students, even though things were installed, for some reason it was blocked on theirs for the first session. So it was helpful to have that IT person right there to kind of troubleshoot. So if that's an option, it might be something that you would consider asking them to do, to be there.
That's a really good point. Thanks, Gina. So now I'd like to hand the floor over to John Manley. John is a counselor at Greensburg-Salem High School. He participated in our pilot program with BNY Mellon with some students from his district. So John, can you go ahead and share some thoughts and reflections on your experience?
Sure. Thanks, Debbie. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Debbie had shared, my name is John Manley. I'm one of the high school counselors at Greensburg-Salem High School. We were fortunate enough to participate in the pilot program with the consortium and with BNY Mellon this year. We recruited, I went off of some teacher recommendations for some students that were interested kind of in the business pathway, not necessarily one way or the other, but just in a general scope. And the teachers shared some recommendations with me, and then I reached out to them about this opportunity for them. I think with any type of career mentoring, I was looking forward just to see how the students would react and, the questions that they would come up with walking into a situation that maybe, was uncomfortable and kind of unfamiliar for them, meeting a professional for the first time. What questions do I ask them? And then also hearing from the students, and saying to the students, they don't know what they don't know yet, and just allowing that opportunity for growth and listening to all of the speakers from BNY Mellon share their different experiences and possibly open some doors for the students to whether they want to continue on that career pathway, or whether they decide like, nah, this is maybe an avenue that I'm not necessarily interested in. I think the feedback from all of the students was positive. They, you know, one, I think they would have much rather preferred probably going and seeing face to face and having a discussion face to face and being on site. But you know, that wasn't an opportunity that we could take advantage of at this point in time. So, you know, we really tried to make the best of, you know, sharing with the students that, okay, this could very well be what you're faced with in the future, you know, showing up on time for a meeting, whether that's in person or over a computer, having your computer, your camera on, you know, kind of what Debbie alluded to, you know, appropriate dress and, you know, not sitting in front of the camera with your hat backwards and maybe sipping a Coke, you know what I mean, while you're, you know, listening to and engaging with the speaker. So all of those things, I try to do a little prep work with the students prior to the sessions, and I have to say they did a great job with it. Um, and overall, I think it was a great experience for the kids just to get that exposure and gain that exposure to, um, you know, to the work-based industry, and for them to get those experiences.
Thanks, John.
Sure.
Did you have, I don't know if I've asked you this, but for the BNY Mellon pilot, we encouraged each district to look for students who were interested in finance, in information technology, and in business. Did you find that one of those pathways was more or less desirable by your student population?
I don't think, because like I said, I think I go back to that sometimes as most of the juniors, I mean, there might have been maybe a few students that were like, no, I definitely am interested more in the finance side of things, or maybe more of the management side. Um, but I think for at least the group of kids that I had, they really went into it with an open mind, kind of unsure. You know, it was more or less broad for them. You know, this is kind of the area that I think that I'm interested in. I've taken some of these courses, and you know, in high school, and then the application pieces of it. Okay, well, what jobs do they really do? You know what I mean, with some of these. So I don't think that one was more desirable than the other. Um, and I was okay with that they kind of went into it with a very open-minded approach and kind of could let them kind of steer their own way.
That's great. John, any advice for the other educators on the call in terms of if they should do this, if they should not do this, what should they do to make it a successful experience?
No, I mean, I think that I'm sure in some way or another, you know, a lot of the educators probably on this call today probably have already dipped their toe in, or maybe already jumped into some sort of career mentoring, and have found what works, and what doesn't work within their own district. But I think for our students, I think one thing that I will continue to try to pass along is just how to effectively ask questions and be engaged with those educators. You know, it's not easy for a 16, 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, even a 20-year-old, 25-year-old, to sometimes be in front of a camera and to have the confidence to ask certain questions after, you know, after hearing the information. So really trying to work on those skills with them, you know, is something that I hope to kind of continue in the future, in hopes that they will engage maybe a little bit more. But like I said, with it being the first time doing it, and the first time for some of these students to be on a call, with a professional kind of talking through a camera, I give them lots of credit for the efforts that they put in.
I will say, John, you had a fabulous set of students
Thank
participated.
you. Thank you.
Um, all right. Well, I think those were the things I was hoping you would share, John. So I'll just, I know we're
Debbie,
coming up on time. Yes, Gina.
I'm sorry, there was a question in the chat for John,
Okay.
and it's asking for him, is this provided to all the students in the class that is taught by the counselor, or was this just for small groups of identified students?
Because it was just a pilot this year, and really we were kind of just hoping just to kind of put it together. This was just I went to our business department, because that was the lane that we were going down, and kind of said, give me a group of students that you feel that would be interested in maybe learning more about, you know, the business finance industry and what BNY Mellon might have to offer. So it was more for this particular, just kind of put out there to the teachers first, and then I went off of teacher recommendations and followed up with the students if it was something that they were interested in, for now.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point. I should clarify. So the program can be embedded in a course, and we have some district doing that now actively for a course that their 11th graders are taking. But it doesn't have to be. It can be students that are interested. The counselor has, in those cases, served as the liaison so far. It wouldn't have to be. But again, you do want an educator involved in making sure that the students are engaged and prepared, and can document that, yes, the students did this, had this experience. But it doesn't have to be embedded in a particular course. So just want to make that clear. If you want to start asking your questions in the chat, we have a few minutes for that. I do want to say that by participating in this webinar, you'll be added to a list of folks who can be connected to employers who participate in a similar webinar, in case you would like to see other people who are interested in this model. Obviously, you're not limited to using it with those folks. You will receive a set of materials from us following this webinar. It will include the slide deck, a sample, what a sample schedule looks like, some tips and tricks from both employers and educators who participated in the pilot, and a couple of other pilots that are going on actually right now, and a couple of other things. And then we just really encourage you to talk with colleagues and students to see who might be interested in something like this, and to business partners in your community who might be willing to engage in something like this. But we are coming up on time. It is 12:29, and I promised I would have you all out of here by 12:30. So if you want to add questions to the chat, we can stay on. John, do you have a few minutes to stay if people have questions?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. So feel free to add some questions to the chat, and we'll try and get those answered before you go. Often. Amy, so for the pilot with BNY Mellon, the 3 districts that were involved and the company had 1-hour sessions for over the course of 6 weeks. That's a similar model to 2 other pilots that we have going on right now. But in the conversations, they had multiple conversations about, would it be better to have 2 sessions a week, or do we need to skip a week? One of the sessions right now, they had to skip a week because of spring break. So it's actually taking place over a longer period of time, but it's just to accommodate schedules. So as long as you get 6 hours total as a minimum requirement, you will have met the PDE piece. And again, all of those sessions were, in this case, a short introduction by a professional or 2 about what they do, what their role in the company was, and then talked about how they spent a good chunk of time. How did I get there? Why was this interesting to me? Usually there was some kind of opportunity for other folks in that department or area business function to also share, so that students could see multiple ways to get to that point. And then there was time for questions at the end. We did always start each session with an icebreaker also, just a good way to get everybody warmed up. Those sessions were at 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. So it was, especially for high school students, I'm sure you know, it's important to have a soft entry point. Jean, so I think I just answered your question. These sessions did happen during the school day. It was the best way to make sure that students participated. In the case of Greensburg-Salem, those students were, that was their virtual, day. So Victoria, I see your question about to check the box off for PIMS. You need to have 6 hours of relationship building time between a professional or professionals and the individual student in a career area of interest. I don't believe the state requires a specific documentation. We generally recommend that students provide some kind of reflection on this is what I heard, and this is how this will affects my future career plans. It can be written, it can be audio recorded, it can be video recorded. You can, certain districts require a full project on these kinds of things. Other districts provide something much more basic. Jennifer, it is possible for a portion of the sessions to be pre-recorded. For example, we talked with a manufacturer who's doing a pilot now. They had some pre-recorded content, but that was a part of a couple of the sessions. You do want at least 3 hours of your time to be live because it's about that relationship building, and it's hard to build a relationship with a pre-recorded piece. If business members agree to mentor, should they contact you? A business could easily reach out to you if they were interested in doing that. I'm not sure if that's what your question is, Brenda. But you could if you had, like, for example, oh, what's the name of that group? If you have a community organization of businesses and several people said, yes, I'm interested, I can commit to X amount of participation in this particular career cluster, you could say, okay, I'm going to pull these 3 folks together and we're going to organize it from this end. That's totally feasible. I'm not sure if that actually answers your question. Gina, do you have a different take?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, if we tried to set this up for our students, should they kind of work through your consortium, or
should they contact us?
Started to start setting up our own platform?
So I think you should, after today, you should have all the materials you need to run it on your own. But if you would like support from the consortium, you can certainly reach out to us and we can see if we have capacity to help or what capacity we have to help. But it's not required that you work with us. Does that help?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think too, just building on what Debbie was saying, I believe she was referring to maybe the Chamber of Commerce in your area. If you want to reach out to them to see maybe what businesses would be interested, just don't feel like everything should have to fall on you because you're the one that's interested. Maybe see if you could recruit any colleagues as you're trying to get students involved in this. Whatever industry is going to be the mentoring organization, you might want to work with teachers in your school to have referrals of students, maybe even reach out to your CTC, your AVTS organization to see if they have some suggestions for students, and they may even have some suggestions for businesses because a lot of them have the occupational advisory committee and they may have know some businesses who would be interested in something like this. So I would just say work with your community, work with your colleagues to see how you could have the best interaction for this on both ends with businesses and with students.
And just to build on kind of the back end, Brenda, for your context, for those of you who are not familiar with the Consortium for Public Education, we are a nonprofit based in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, focused on education equity and engagement. And so this was something that we heard that there was a need in our region and worked to find a way to help build the capacity of our districts. And once we realized that this could be a valuable model that other folks could take and adapt for their own, to help their own students, we realized we would not be able to scale it on our own. We have a 12-person full-time staff. So we are always ready to assist with districts who are looking to help help their students be more prepared for life after high school. But we understand that this isn't a model we wanted to hold closely because we wanted it to benefit the most number of students. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all so much. You'll get an email from me in the next day or so. If you have questions before then, you can certainly reach out to Gina or myself. Our emails are in the slide deck, and obviously you've been getting emails. So thank you again for giving us your time this afternoon. We hope this really helps you and your students as you figure out how to get them this work-based learning experience and more prepared for life after high school. Thank you again, John, for being with us.
No problem. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey,
Have a
Debbie,
good day.
real quick, I'm sorry, I know you're getting ready to go. I was just getting ready to type in the chat, but we're going to close.
That's okay. Go ahead, Mike.
So I'm creating our business advisory council for our school district, and I have 5 or 6 company people who already said, I want in. So my thought was hearing what John said, and we've done the e-mentoring through Smart Futures in past years, which is so different. But I thought, so if we did the 6 hours, but I had the 6 members they did their 1-hour session each week, I might get a bigger number of kids who want to stay in this. We've been doing PNC Partner Up for 4 years. My senior number this year was low, obviously with COVID and all that. There were only 11 kids. But I thought, but if we have 6 different businesses, I could share this, try to recruit kids. I think I'll get a bigger number of students who will want to listen to all 6 to hear a wide variety. But I didn't know if we should focus on just one, like John did with BNY, or is it okay to use multiples for the 6 hours?
It's totally fine to use multiple businesses for the 6 hours. There are 2 considerations for you to think about. One is ideally you have someone from the business community who attends multiple sessions, because it's hard to build that relationship with one person in an hour. The other piece is I would try and have those 6 folks represent not 6 different industries, not 6 different career clusters, but different components of between 1 and 3 career clusters. I would say the main reason we worked with just BNY Mellon is, I don't know how much you know about them, but it is a huge, huge employer. They have tons of employees. They have so many business functions. Like, they had the capacity and the breadth of jobs to talk about and keep it engaging and have folks do that. If you're working with smaller employers, definitely invite multiple people to the table.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And again, I know we may want to reach out to you guys for some help and get some information and maybe help, share things with the staff members and some of the employers to say, because I know some employers are going to say, well, what am I supposed to say? What do you want me to do? So, anything you could share would be great.
Yeah, Mike, we actually are planning a session similar to this for employers on May 6th. So if you want to have, if anyone's available, they are welcome to join that session on the 6th.
Okay.
I can make sure the registration is included in the follow-up materials for today. And even if they can't attend live, they'll get a recording. And then from there, if they would like to have another conversation with us, we'd be happy to talk.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks for being here, Mike. It's good to
Always.
see you.
Yep. Good to see you all.
Anybody else questions? I certainly don't mean to cut people off. I just want to be respectful of time.
I definitely think, Debbie, too, one thing I didn't mention was the time frame. Like, I think the chunking the no longer than an hour was definitely beneficial, because I think once we started hitting into that 45-minute time frame, it was like, okay, how much is the sit and get, you know what I mean? Which is important, because there was a lot of good information in there, but then how much do we try to chime in to try to engage a little bit? And I know that's not as easy whenever you are through a computer versus face to face. So that was one thing that actually just, Mike's comment kind of stood out to me, that made me think of that 1 hour time frame and the
max,
how
unless
much
you're in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only time I would say more than an hour is if you're in person and you're like doing a
Right.
tour as part of it. And so you're
Correct.
moving around.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'll make sure that's part of the tips and tricks document that everyone gets
Sounds great.
following the session. So for those of you who are still hanging on, thank you. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Debbie and Gina. We'll talk to you